Hello, everybody. This is The Decision by Alice Dunbar-Nelson. When Marion Foreman married Bert Cortlandt, the world of make-believe literati of which she had formed a temporary center applauded. It was so Browning-esque, quite romantic, and not at all in the conventional, sordid, matter-of-fact fashion of lesser souls. It was, in fact, an elopement, for Marion's mother, through long years of widowhood, had acquired a keenest vision which penetrated the artistic veneer of Cortlandt's soul. She had first warned Marion against him, then discountenanced his presence, then threatened maternal authority against subjected clandestine meetings. Marion had disregarded, disobeyed, pouted, and finally eloped. Mrs. Foreman sighingly resigned herself to the match and vowed that no matter what came of it, she would never play a part in the Greek chorus of I told you so's, which she saw in the inevitable future. The make-believe circle of Bohemia went into soul raptures for a month and then forgot the incident. For a glorious period, Marion basked in the violet light of semi-social approval until another furor came. Then she awakened to the realities of existence and found it sordid. On one day she had a fit of the blues. This is a disease in which men and unmarried women may revel to their soul's last delight. But to married women it is essentially forbidden, for might they not wish to indulge even when their lords and masters are also thus inclined? Marion had not learned this lesson, Mrs. Foreman having wisely deemed further advice to her daughter superfluous. So when Cortlandt came home in the full fever of a fit of artistic temperament, he was disconcerted to find his wife unresponsive to his mood. He sat down by her side and attempted to take her hand, but it lay inert in his palm. "Are you ill?" he asked with a feint of concern in his voice. She gave a dispirited negative and murmured unwisely something about being homesick. Homesick? The word awakened a latent demon in his soul. What right had she to be homesick? Was not her home here with him? Were not her duties here? He reproved her sternly, then coarsely, then vilely. Marion shrank under the whip sting of his commonness. For several weeks she had suspected the streak of vulgarity in him, and it was this that had turned her thoughts regretfully to the gentle refinement of her own home life. She stared at him in surprise to discover a trace of an alcoholic demon in the words and manner. His jaw was set prognathous, his eyes red-streaked across their blue, his mouth loose-cornered. Disgust, shame, terror, horror seized her, and, half insane from self-pity, she hurled the book in her hand at his swaying form and rushed from the room. For 4 years she led a life that was a fitful dream of torment, disgust, terror, love, longing for release. He was pitifully ill, and she nursed him back to life with a loving care that astonished even Mrs. Foreman, still quietly watching her daughter's Hades of a life. He was successful beyond his most sanguine expectations, and Marion joyed with him, the while she hated herself that she could be happy over his successes. She alternately loved and hated, feared and trusted, caressed and spurned him, and he alternately loved her with the wildest, most insane devotion, and lashed her with the most scathing scorn that his ready tongue was capable of. They clung together sadly like two thieves in a world of honest men. She felt the fineness go out of her soul like the gold dust out of the heart of a flower. When he struck her, she scarcely even wondered. She grew skeptical of all married women and wondered how they would conceal their sorrow so successfully, for hers were suspected by all her friends. But she loved him, and no matter where he was, or how far into the depths he went in search after the bizarre in life, she went after him, brought him home, and freshly whited the sepulchre of his being so that no one might know for a certainty. Then the crash came. It was not so much a crash as a sudden parting of a chain already strained to the pulling of the last link. There was a deed that even Marion could not bear, and she left his house and wandered abjectly home to lie sick and wounded in body and spirit for a weary flight of months. Mrs. Foreman watched her curiously. The world of her friends watched her with curiosity. None of them believed that Marian would do more than recover her health before she would rejoin Cortland in the great, dreary new mansion he had just but built for her. Marian stayed on with her mother, inscrutably silent and cold at first, still more inscrutably cheerful, gay, and society-loving when the Lenten season of her illness had passed. After the first year, Cortland's friends began to lay bets as to how long the separation would last. Cortland had been indifferent when the break came. Later he stormed, threatened, and demanded his wife of her mother. Then he pled and wrote her letters that she might read one every day, wherein he begged forgiveness and promised reform. He fell ill and lay at death's door, while physicians telegraphed Marian frantically, assuring her that Cortland's only chances for recovery lay in her presence at his bedside. Marian read all the letters, signing for the registered ones with a smile of contempt. She refused the money he'd placed in her bank to her account. She answered with silence his almost threatening demands for his letters and keepsakes. She treated the physician's appeal with the same disdain. "He's not going to die," she told her mother. "If he were as ill as they say, I would feel it here." Mrs. Foreman forbore to remind Marian that she had passionately avowed more than once that all love in her was blotted out, leaving a dull ash of regret and a hollow longing for frivolities. After the second year, Marian's men friends began to wonder why she was so long in getting a divorce. When the boldest of them ventured a question, she elevated her brows in disgust. "Divorce? Why? What for? I'm strong enough to keep Cortland at a distance without the intervention of the law. But suppose there should arise a question of marriage again," he stammered with a longing, caressing look at her long, beautiful, grown radiant and youthful again. He stammered with a longing, caressing look at her beauty grown radiant and youthful again. "If he wishes to marry, let him get a divorce. I shall not interfere. I'd like to see some other woman go through my experience." She let herself speak bitterly. She had known the man for a long while. "But yourself?" His voice was as insinuating as convention would allow. Marian's eyes grew savage. "I wouldn't trust the kingliest men that ever trod the world," she breathed through tense teeth. When in the third year, still evincing a cheerful indifference toward all phases of life that surprised even Marian's most nearly bohemian friends, the news of Cortland's utter failure in health and finances left her apparently unmoved and uninterested. Those who were watching her with the deepest interest and curiosity gave her up in despair as an enigma worthy only of Oedipus. If Mr. Cortland is lying on his death's bed, and you know he has but a short while to live, and you feel that I can soothe him and help him die in peace, send for me. But don't cheat me with a lie in order to effect a patched-up reconciliation." This she wrote to the physician when the rumors came. "It's only my duty, mother," she explained as she showed the letter before sealing it. Mrs. Foreman quietly acquiesced. She had long since ceased troubling her brain with finding the fine distinction of the boundary between hate, love, indifference, and duty. But at the end of the year, Cortland was out again, though with broken health and sadly impaired fortune. At this juncture, an uncle died. He was a misty, vague relative who, having made his fortune in the far west, preferred to stay there and enjoy life in true democratic fashion, rather than drifting into the east in fashion and hollowness and much spending of money. Therefore, Marian and her mother, being his only living relatives, found themselves suddenly possessed of a fortune of millions, a regular Oriental Aladdin sort of figure, 3/4 of which was Marian's in her own right. Thus, life put on an entirely new aspect for Marian. It meant independence, affluence, the world treasures of life open to her. No matter what it was, she might command it with an almost imperial dignity. From a life of comparative poverty, she was suddenly lifted to an almost bewildering power. If in the dreariest moments of her workday life she had looked back on the luxuries, dearly bought, that Cortland had surrounded her with, she had compensation now in the calm contemplation of a cloudless future. If in her most womanly moments she had thought of Cortland in poverty and ill health, she could show her Samaritan spirit now by putting him at ease and beyond any future of want. "And it's only the right thing to do, Mother," she said confidingly. "I was poor when Bert married me, and at his worst he never begrudged me a whim, be it ever so costly. Now I can settle a sum on him that will put him beyond what for the rest of his life. Don't you think it's a good idea?" Mrs. Foreman applauded the suggestion. Years had taught her the futility of doing more than acceding to a suggestion when her advice was asked. But Marion's lawyer called to see Cortlandt about the proposed settlement of $50,000 a year. He found him politely but firmly insistent upon refusing any such bounty. "I don't want her money," he muttered, pacing the floor wildly. "I want her. She knows. I wanted her when I was rich and she was poor, and now that the situation is reversed, I don't want her to throw me a crust and bid me be gone like a beggar. If she wants to help me, let her come to me." That night, Marion lay with burning eyes, searching in the darkness for the answer to her problem. The love in her heart, she had said, was dead, and ashes lay in its place, but he needed help. She weighed the balance the two lives that she might lead, a carefree queen with a roseate world before her, or a heart-sick, unloving wife bound to a querulous invalid. Behind her lay the memories of her wild life, a life of blows and caresses, of intoxicating days of perfect love, and depths of degradation and vileness. How could she know that his promises of good conduct would be kept? How would she know but that at slightest provocation he would not break into his awful passions again? He might live until he died of old age, long after her eyes had closed in sheer misery. She knew that he would be content with no half measure. To go back to him would mean that she must be his wife, through all the heights and depths that she had once trod. Before her lay two paths, pleasure and happiness on the one, and unknown formless misery on the other. Which should be the way of her life? All night Marion tossed feverishly in the darkness. By morning her decision had been made, and once made would be unalterable. In the gray twilight of the dawn she arose, and smiling quietly as a great burden lifted from her soul, went to her mother's room. "Mother, I've come to tell you what I have decided to do," she said softly.